Hey there, Everyday Conman here, and I'm continuing the SSX theme this month by looking into the series' history and backstory before reviewing and completing SSX Tricky for next week's review. So with all that said, well, let's dive into this. This is Everyday Analyzing. Now, to my fellow gamers, there's this thing outside of the gaming community called sports. Now, some could consider these the anti-video game. Heck, years ago you could consider those who played video games and those who played sports rivals. Back then, it was a rivalry considered to be jocks versus nerds. Anyway, over the years, both learned to live in peace. There were video games that were used for sports, such as Kinect or the Wii or whatever the PlayStation equivalent was. And of course, there were sports that were turned into video games. From NFL football to FIFA football, or soccer, to even bass fishing. Bass fishing. Now there have been a lot of great sports games, but a flaw a lot of people find with the sports series is that the core mechanic will always remain the same. While this may be correct, every sequel and every remake will have a quirk or factor to set it different from other games in the franchise. This is what sets some sports games higher than another, such as Madden 04 or Tony's Pro Skater 2, or of course... Now before getting into the history, you may have noticed something about the Tricky characters. They look familiar, don't they? Well, the answer is simple. Their developer of the game is Electronic Arts, EA. They're also known for... Bingo! Now of course there is a difference. This is EA, right? Well sure, but they're still the same company. Just different branches. You know, they just happen to be in Canada. Now in order to make this analysis easier to understand, I'm going to split these games up into 3 arcs. The Tricky arc, the Mountain arc, and the Realistic arc. Now the difference between these arcs are presentation, gameplay style, and their sequel status. Like many games with multiple sequels, some aren't exactly good sequels to another previous title. For example, I wouldn't call On Tour to be a good sequel to Tricky as much as it's a good sequel to SSX 3. Or I wouldn't say Star Fox Adventures is a good sequel to 64 as Assault was. I went there. The Tricky arc has 2 games, SSX and SSX Tricky. SSX was originally a game solely for the PS2. It's the first of the series and came out October 30th, 2000. It was actually a launch title for the PlayStation 2 as well. It was fast, fun, mainly starring characters Moby, Mac, Elise, and Corey, with side characters being Jurgen, JP, Zoe, and Hero. Now this was a great start to the series, but like I said before, it was a little overshadowed by its next game, SSX Tricky. Now a big difference between these 2 games was that the first game was exactly that, their first game. It was almost like their test run. The second they got a hold of what the game's borders were, they pushed them to the limit. SSX Tricky came out and did exactly that. This game stars Elise, Eddie, and Moby. Mac is actually the 4th headliner, but is only available in the NTSC versions of the game. In the PAL versions, Mac is replaced with his cousin, Marty. Nobody knows why, he doesn't come back in any other game, except SSX 3, by cheating. Yay, cheating! Now we're getting into the Mountain arc. Now what this arc is it just basically all takes place on a single mountain instead of being across the world. The first game of this arc is SSX 3. SSX 3 came out in 2003, 2 years after Tricky. Now this really changes up the game this time since there's only one mountain with many ways to go down it. The graphics have also improved and there's a second tier of uber tricks added. The task of this game is to simply conquer the mountain. There are returning characters and new characters alike, but there's only 2 we're gonna need to cover here. Elise is the leading lady here. The other character is Griff Simmons.
Protect me, go!
No, not that Griff! This Griff. He doesn't look like much now, but I'll come back to him later. The next game was in 2005 called SSX On Tour. This one was special because it changed the uber tricks into monster tricks, and it also had the addition of skiing. Plus, the main story of the game was now centered around the custom characters, including Mario, Luigi, and Peach for those lucky GameCube players. The style actually changes a bit too, as they take on a very sketchbook-like kind of style. Upon with that, in 2007 they came out with SSX Blur for the Wii. Not really much changes here, other than a bit of the style. The story is also considered to be a prequel to On Tour, despite coming out afterwards. That's something I've neglected to mention actually. Throughout these games, the characters actually grow older. If you're like me and have only played one game of theirs, you'll notice a huge difference in their next and most recent game. SSX 2012 is the only game in the third arc. The recent SSX came out on PS3 and Xbox 360, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a really fun game, a lot like Tricky. This is the only other game of the series I've played, and I really do love it. They brought more realism to the game and made all of the impossible stunts more realistic. The story of this game is that you are now playing to conquer the deadly descents as Team SSX.
This is why it's called the Deadly Arc.
Team SSX now consists of the new frontwoman Zoe. She recruits Elise, Mac, Kaori, Simon, Moby, Tane, Max, and newcomer Ty so they can conquer the deadly descents before their new rival does. Remember whom I told you to remember before?
You can't call dibs on a spaceship.
God dang it, we talked about this!
Dude, if you keep doing that, this is gonna get old quick.
Griff Simmons is the big bad guy in this, as the theme is how you must survive the deadly descents before he does. This opens the old modes like Race It and Trick It, but it also brings in a new mode. Survive It. This adds a new realistic aspect to the game, as you now won't survive that 50-foot wipeout, so you'll kinda have to be a little more careful. Like I said, this game really shows how much the characters have matured. Mac has really grown into his coolness, Kaori's no longer super adorable, Simon doesn't look psychopathic, and even Zoe is toned down and older. Even with the maturity, these characters are still the characters we know and love, just a bit older and wiser. Now, from a personal standpoint, I've kinda seen SSX Tricky as one of those games. Like Kirby's Air Ride or Super Monkey Ball 2. Everyone's played it and enjoyed it, but no one seems to talk about it. Seriously, the first job I worked at was a supermarket where I served Chinese food. At the end of the day, I washed dishes and the workplace with my coworkers from both Chinese and the Italian department. And you want to know something? This game is the thing that each and every one of us had in common. Even the girls! We all had played this at one point and even ended most of the night singing It's Tricky because of it.
Oh, another long night.
Yeah, we've been worked to the bone all day.
I know, it's so annoying.
Come on, guys, keep it chill.
They should know that washing these dishes really is not that easy.
Yeah, seriously.
You guys are just complaining. Yeah.
What's on your mind?
I feel like that's part of a song somewhere.
Yeah, you would feel
Not
that way.
easy. Oh yeah, I remember. I played a game with that in it once.
Really?
Yeah, it was SSX Tricky.
Oh, I played that.
What?
Wow,
Remember
really?
that game?
Yeah.
Now, how'd that song go?
So much
It
fun.
went something like
Yeah,
that.
it started off with that.
Guys,
Yeah,
it-
it started off with the
Yeah.
This speech is my recital. I think it's very vital.
To rock a
All right,
rhyme that's right on time. It's trick.
Here we go!
Pretty cool, huh? Getting back, the idea behind the series itself was motocross. Steve Rex Schaffner, the executive producer, stated that the idea of SSX was to essentially be motocross for snowboards. He wanted the speeds, the jumps, all of it, all in one snow-filled, rail-grinding, point-building, tricky-tricking, powder-bitchin', boost-bringing, rage-inducing, friendship-building, rival-making awesomeness of a sport! And then make that into a game. Not even kidding, Steve Rex Schaffner actually staged the first, as they called it, border cross race. As time went on, they made the game but named it Snowboarding Supercross, better known as SSX for short. But just to confuse you a bit more, in SSX 2012, Team SSX actually stands for Snowboarding, Surfing, and Motocross, making the name much more confusing. I do think that'd make for some interesting spin-offs though. To think maybe Mac trying to surf or Moby on a dirt bike, it's kind of a humorous thought, isn't it? No, it's just me. Anyway, sales-wise, SSX Tricky is actually not the magnum opus of the series. That title goes to its sequel, SSX 3. Whether it's because of the new game style, its build-up from Tricky, or the inclusion of Mario characters, statistics show that... well, statistics don't actually really show much. The company actually keeps statistics fairly under wraps. However, the statistics that are shown show that SSX 3 sold in the 5 million copies range compared to the 2 to 3 million copies of the first two. Now let's get into some information about SSX Tricky and how I'm going to complete it. Well, in order to unlock the other characters, you must get a gold medal. If you get 8 gold medals, you unlock all the characters. For every character, you have individual challenges. The two big challenges for these characters are ranking up and finishing the chapters of their trick books. The more trick chapters you do, the more outfits you get. Same thing with leveling up, except this time you get boards with every rank up you get. There are 10 rankings and they are as follows: Newbie, Rookie, Contender, Natural Star, Veteran, Champ, Superstar, Sensei, and Master. Now the trick book can be achieved through almost one race, whereas the rank ups will be a bit more difficult since you need to play through the race and show off in order to get master ranking. There are also 2 stages, Pipe Dream, which is a trick stage, and Untracked, which is kind of like a race stage. By next week, in order to mark the completion status, I will have all 12 characters at master ranking with their trick books completed. So next week I'll have a full 100% review of SSX Tricky. So, till then, I'm Everyday Conman. See ya! Okay, so the time actually went up and it's still going!